When I was young, time felt endless. Days passed softly, like they owed me more. I postponed learning, postponed courage, postponed becoming serious about life. I told myself I was smart enough to catch up later. What I didn't understand is that time never waits patiently. It quietly collects interest. And one morning, you wake up older, wondering where those invisible years went, without warning, without mercy, without a refund. Remember believing that youth was permanent, that energy would always return, that motivation could be summoned on command. I treated time like a generous friend instead of a strict judge. I spent hours distracted, chasing small comforts, avoiding difficult choices. Nothing felt dangerous because nothing felt final. But time is not loud when it takes from you. It doesn't stun or rush you. It simply moves forward, carrying your unused potential with it, while you remain convinced you are still at the beginning. What surprises me most now is how reasonable my excuses sounded back then. I told myself I needed more clarity, more confidence, more preparation. In truth, I was afraid of committing to a direction. I didn't want to choose, because choosing meant losing other possibilities. So I stayed still. I waited, and while I waited, life kept moving. Opportunities don't knock forever, and ambition weakens when it's ignored too long. Time doesn't punish you for waiting. It simply rewards those who don't. There is a quiet danger in believing you are still preparing. Preparation can feel productive while hiding fear. I stayed busy with plans instead of action, thoughts instead of effort. I watched others move forward and told myself our paths were different. Maybe they were, but movement itself changes a person. While I stayed comfortable, they learned through mistakes. While I protected my pride, they built resilience. Time favors motion, even imperfect motion. Standing still may feel safe. Didn't realize that habits were being formed while I was undecided. The small choices I repeated every day were shaping my future quietly. Wasting an hour felt harmless. Wasting a day felt normal. Eventually, wasting years felt familiar. Time doesn't change your life all at once. It teaches you who you are through repetition. I became very good at delay, very skilled at comfort. And one day I noticed it was harder to focus, harder to begin, harder to care deeply. Time had trained me, and I hadn't been paying attention. The hardest truth is that no one stopped me. No alarm rang. No voice warned me clearly. Life assumes you are paying attention. When you are young, you think consequences arrive immediately. But most consequences are slow. They grow quietly while you feel safe. Skills you don't build early take longer later. Discipline ignored becomes resistance. What once required a little effort eventually demands pain. Time is generous at first, then strict, not cruel, just honest. It returns exactly what you invested, nothing more, nothing less. Used to underestimate the value of mornings. I slept late, woke late, thinking the day was mine to control. But mornings are the most honest part of life. They arrive whether you are ready or not. How you spend them sets the tone for everything else. A wasted morning ripples into wasted afternoons, evenings, and nights. I ignored that ripple, thinking small losses didn't matter. But small losses become mountains when compounded. I realized too late that time doesn't forgive laziness or distraction. It only rewards awareness and action. I also didn't respect my own energy. I poured it into things that offered no return. Empty entertainment, endless scrolling, fleeting distractions. They felt harmless at first, even comforting. But comfort has a cost, paid slowly in lost potential. I traded moments that could have shaped my mind, my character, my future, for temporary pleasure. Looking back, I see the small, each one seemed insignificant alone, yet together they formed a life half-lived. Energy misused is time wasted, and time wasted is a debt you cannot repay. Learn too late that decisions matter more than intentions. I had good ideas, plans to improve, dreams to chase, but they stayed in my mind. Thinking about action gave me the illusion of progress. Yet the world doesn't honor intentions. It rewards execution. Every day I delayed, I gave the advantage to those who acted. I watched opportunities pass while I waited for the perfect moment that never came. Time doesn't wait for readiness. It continues steadily, silently, taking with it the chances you assumed would last forever. I spent too many years fearing failure. I imagined the worst outcomes and convinced myself inaction was safer. But in reality, avoiding risk only guaranteed stagnation. Every moment I hesitated, life moved on without me. I realized that mistakes are far less costly than lost time. Failure teaches. Delays don't. Time waits for no one, and fear can quietly steal decades if you let it. I wish I had understood that sooner, that of trying into failing still moves you forward, while waiting only leaves you older, wiser, and empty-handed. Also failed to value focus. My attention was scattered, flitting from one distraction to another. I believe multitasking was progress, but it only diluted my effort. Hours slipped by while I thought I was. Being productive time doesn't forgive fragmented attention. The mind grows sharp only when dedicated to meaningful effort, repeated consistently. If I could speak to my younger self, I would say, guard your attention as fiercely as your life, because once it drifts away, retrieving it costs more than you can imagine. There was also a moment when I realized knowledge had been within reach all along. Books were waiting, mentors were available, lessons were everywhere, but I kept telling myself I would learn later. When life slowed down, life never slows down. It accelerates. The older you get, and the quieter curiosity grows. Learning early is not about being impressive. It is about being prepared. I postponed building understanding, and later I paid for it with confusion and regret. Ignorance is expensive, and time raises its price every year. Underestimated how quickly discipline fades when it is not practiced. At first, skipping effort felt like rest. Then rest became avoidance. Eventually, avoidance became identity. Time shapes you whether you're guided or not. I thought motivation would return on its own, not the other way around. The longer I waited, the heavier hearting felt. What once required willpower later demanded courage. Time doesn't erase weakness. It reinforces patterns. Whatever you repeat today, you strengthen for tomorrow. Good or bad, progress or regret. Also learn that who you spend your time with quietly decides who you become. I stayed around people who talked more than they acted, who complained more than they built. It felt comfortable to belong. Time shared with the wrong people drains ambition without announcing it. You slowly adjust your standards downward, your dreams become jokes, and your urgency fades. I thought voting meant staying. Wisdom would have meant leaving sooner. Time magnifies influence, good or bad. It rarely gives you a second chance to choose your circle again. There came a point when I noticed how fast years collapse into memories. One decade blends into the next without asking permission. What once felt distant becomes suddenly irreversible. I realized that time does not mark its passing with loud milestones. It moves quietly through routines. Wake up, repeat. Sleep, repeat. Without intention, days blur together and vanish. I didn't lose my time in dramatic ways. I lost it in ordinary ones. That is the most dangerous kind of loss, because it feels harmless until there is nothing left to recover. I once believed that life would eventually slow down and give me space to fix everything. I thought there would be a clear pause, a moment when I could look around and start again properly. Energy declined. Options narrowed. Time doesn't create space for reflection. You must take it while you can. When you delay self-correction, life corrects you instead, often harshly. I learned that waiting for the right season is a quiet form of surrender. Seasons change whether you act or not, and they rarely come back the same way. Also misunderstood what success actually costs. I thought it required talent, luck, or perfect timing. In reality, it demanded consistency, something I didn't respect when I was young. Small daily efforts felt insignificant, so I ignored them. But time multiplies whenever you feed it. Neglect grows just as reliably as discipline. When I finally looked up, they were far ahead, not because they were better, but because they showed up repeatedly. Me doesn't reward intensity. It rewards persistence. One of my deepest mistakes was confusing being busy with being meaningful. My days were full, yet empty. I filled my schedule to avoid confronting myself. Noise became a shield. But time is not impressed by movement without direction. You still arrive nowhere. Looking back, I see how often I avoided stillness, because stillness asks honest questions. What are you building? Who are you becoming? Time eventually forces those questions anyway, usually when answers are harder to change. Busyness delays truth, but it never escapes it. Didn't understand that self-respect is built through promises kept to yourself. Each time I said tomorrow and didn't follow through, something inside me weakened. Confidence faded quietly, replaced by doubt. Time notices integrity, even when no one else does. When you honor your word to yourself, time becomes an ally. When you break it repeatedly, time becomes a witness to your decline. I spent years repairing trust with others. That the hardest relationship to rebuild was the one with myself. That repair always costs more time than you expect. I once believed I would recognize the moment when my life truly mattered. I thought there would be a clear sign, a dramatic turning point. Instead, meaning was hidden inside ordinary choices. Time doesn't announce purpose. It reveals it through patterns. What you consistently give attention to becomes your life. As direction, I overlooked small responsibilities, thinking they were beneath my potential. In reality, they were training me to ignore the small duties today, and tomorrow's opportunities will quietly pass you by. So if you are listening to me now, don't feel accused. Feel warned with care. You still have what I no longer do. Flexible time, recoverable mistakes, energy that returns quickly. Use it deliberately. Choose one thing you know you've been delaying and take a small step today, not tomorrow. Don't wait for motivation. Don't wait for clarity. Action creates both. Time is watching, quietly, patiently. Make it your partner, not your judge. One honest step today can save you years of regret later.